Okay, so the time is 6:00. I think I have 6:01. Today is January 29th, and it's hearing myself again.
There's just an echo too.
And we are at the Life Safety Park Training Room, and this is our council retreat. So there is a quorum present. This is a meeting that really doesn't have any action items on it. So if people get up and leave and come back, it's just that you've missed some serious conversation. Yeah, missed something. So I wanted to say welcome to John. I know this is your first retreat, and you actually get no, you don't get paid. You actually get a benefit. This might be the only benefit from having your election delayed, because you don't have to start your very first meeting in the middle of budget, where a lot of the decisions have already been made and you're playing catch up. So you get to be here when we first start talking about budget for the next year. You may think maybe that wasn't such a good idea, but it is a perk. It is a perk. Okay, so item A is review of council code of conduct, house rules, meeting protocols, communications. In this area, I want people to talk about anything they like, they dislike. If I've fallen on the job, I do catch myself every once in a while when we've had good discussion. There's a motion and a second, and I just go ahead and call for the vote instead of saying anything else anybody wants to say. So I do want you to know I think about it. I may not always do it, but I do think about it. All right, so let's start with house rules, code of conduct. This is a set of rules, if you will, that has evolved over time. Is there anything on here that anybody wants to tweak or look at differently? Or John, do you have a question as to what any of those things mean? Mark, you have a set of all of this, right? Yes?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I see Don Carroll, do you have a set as well? Should have been emailed out this afternoon.
Yes, I do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mark has it too? Okay. No, this Mark? Okay. Okay. Yes, so yeah. This is work session.
Oh,
so,
that's right.
But
Okay.
But you do
Mayor.
need to turn your phone on, your microphone on.
Oh.
Oh, good.
Okay, so red is off.
Red is on.
Red is on.
Oh, that's what I had on. Okay, it sound different? No.
What? Huh?
Mayor.
What?
I'm joking. No, I think just for the benefit of everybody, but especially John, because you're new. So first of all, welcome to retreat. Is just the house rule I look at that kind of stands out is I've been on council is the vote and move on. So I bring that up because, right, we will all agree to disagree. And I think that's the respect and the professionalism that we have, right? Everybody's going to have different views. We come to council to hear from staff or citizens and everybody else. And so from time to time, there will be questions on why did you vote the way you voted? And that's fine. We've had some conversations afterwards. But I think I just bring that up as an emphasis of, right, like just because we voted a certain way it's not to be taken personally. I think one of the things that I remember from retreat last time, and Councilmember Roden or Gary said this last time, was that I think it's important for us as council members also in voting to make sure that during, before our vote or after our vote, to maybe give our constituents who are listening the reason why we might vote one way or the other, so they kind of understand the background. A lot of times we hear the information in work session. And so when we come out to the big room, they may not realize that we're making the decision because of what we've heard. It's not, we're just not saying, you know, yay or nay. And so a lot of times it's just giving that communication. But I emphasize that from the standpoint of just from time to time, I have served with council members who sometimes have taken a vote personally, and it sometimes can get a little contentious. And so all that to say, we can just agree to vote and move on. That's important. So,
And the other part of that is when we are out in the community, you represent the council in a lot of situations. And if you were one of those people who voted against what ended up passing, or the other way around, to support the council's decision, when you can even say personally, I had a different view, but the council did this, and then support the fact that this is where the council is going and where it's moving forward. I don't think we've had that issue in quite some years, but there have been those issues in the past.
I've had one or two situations where I voted a certain way, and I've had a couple of council members reach out and be like, why did you vote that way? Right. And let me tell you my view of why I voted this way. And that's great. You're not going to change my mind because I've already voted, but we can understand where we came from, and that's fine as long as that's kind of where it stays.
Well, in addition to that, just what you just said, when you are going to vote and you have a pretty good feel as to how people are going to vote. Some people just say, I'm going to support this and this is why. But if everybody is saying they're going to support it, they're going to support it, they're going to support it, and then you are the one who votes no and you've said nothing, then not only is the public that's watching curious as to why you voted no, so are your council members. And so it's important to be able to say why you're taking the stance that you're taking.
And it also helps during discussions to understand different points of view. There's been numerous times that someone, there's a lot of other people here that are a lot smarter than any one of us. And it just helps to hear different points of view because it can definitely change your opinion. I've been really surprised at the number of times that I'll go into a discussion with my own opinion and will change it after I hear other information, because there's always something else to be said and known. Kind of the way I like to think about the vote itself is, it is your vote, but the decision is our decision, and it is a we thing. So, and that's it is your vote, but after the vote is taken, it's a we. And as long as we operate in that mode, and even though you may not agree with the overall decision, it is the council's decision.
I would add, I support what Brianna was saying about asking questions that
Did
were
you
already
turn
at.
your vote?
Go ahead.
Did you turn your thing
Yep.
on?
That were already asked in work session. For us, it seems like a waste of time, but if it's a critical question that you couldn't tell from the information, then the public probably couldn't tell from the posted information. So it's important to ask those questions. The other thing I think, and it's not listed here because I guess it's legal, it's implied, is the whole quorum situation and being really careful about not responding to tidbits with a question or a comment to the rest of the council, because I think that puts the other council members in a really tough spot, quorum has just been established and you don't want to be a part of it. But you are a part of it because you're on the email. So I think just being real careful with that is important.
That's the do not reply all. I think we talked about that a lot during orientation, but that's, yeah, please do not reply all. And it's gotten me in trouble at my regular work because I respond to the person who asked the question and nobody else gets the information. So,
Oh, I've got a vice president up in New Hampshire that is furious with me because I refuse to reply all. And
mhm.
she is just absolutely, she accuses me of leaving her out of the discussion, which is nothing further from the truth. It's just like, you just get finally ingrained into it, so.
Yeah, it's kind of, the other and I thought it was in the council expectations, but I know last time we talked at length about cell phone use, especially during executive session. I know I have my cell phone out, but it's not because I'm going to answer it or use it. It's so I can see what time it is. Because as I came in here, my watch was on 10 after 8. So I guess I don't use this watch very often, but especially during executive session, that information isn't supposed to leave the room. But then on the dais, it was supposed to be, the use of the cell phone is for emergencies only. So that's what we were going to, tell everybody to put their cell phones away. But by the end of our conversation, we decided that we were going to trust everybody to follow the.
I think what we talked about was not using it to communicate. There are
Right.
times you'll say, check y'all's calendar, see if you're
Right.
open. Or in an executive session, if somebody's presenting financial information, you want to grab your calculator and
Yep.
look at it different ways.
Or
But
we're talking about a company and you want to Google the
Right.
company, that kind of stuff, but not for communications. You're right. Yeah, it's true. Because we do have a tendency to use our phone for almost everything these days. Anything else that anybody else can think of?
the other thing we've talked about, I think we've been really good at it the last few years, is making motions in the affirmative,
Oh, yes.
which gets a little awkward sometimes. You're against something, you've spoken against it, and then you make a motion to approve the item, but just making sure we stay with that.
Yeah, that is our legal counsel's rule. He doesn't like it when we do motions in the negative.
We actually have. Which one was it that we didn't vote on Tuesday?
Canceling the meeting.
Thank you. I was actually going to make the motion and I realized that letting it pass was the right way to go. But the way that we would have done that is to make a motion to approve the meeting for, what was it, March 9th or whatever the date was. And then when the vote came up, we would have voted no. And
And usually you have to remind everybody, and if you don't want this, remember, vote no.
So that, and there are times, especially in some applications, particularly with real estate, where we would do something like that. It would be completely appropriate to make the motion a positive motion for the ruling and then vote no, or vote however you want. But that would be the appropriate way to do it. And Bob can, at some other time, can go into a great length of discussion on how that keeps us out of trouble in the future. It makes our position very well known and clear.
So I noticed that, I'm glad you brought it up, the meeting. We left it open. We didn't want to take it in motion to approve or disapprove. Is that because we are leaving there for record for future? And what is the reason we are leaving it in the agenda item?
A lot of times when we are looking back at what happened this time last year,
Okay.
you look at the agenda. And like Mike said, it's kind of a learning experience so that next time, if we didn't do that this time, and next year when it came up, John would not have known that it is something that we do.
But that's why it was on the agenda. The reason we didn't vote was there was no need for any action.
There was no need for action.
Right. So the public who's watching this thinking, hey, we are skipping that item.
No, we talked about it and
Right.
said,
We are not taking a
we're not
vote.
taking
in-
a vote on it.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, essentially by the fact that nobody made a motion,
That it
we
does.
said we're unanimous in not taking action, right?
Okay. Well, okay, that's fine. I understood. But the watching people, they said, hey, why are they skipping that item?
Because then they didn't listen to Mike's
Right.
example of why we didn't. Take note, no. Okay, let's see. Any other conversation about this particular, this particular group of? Any changes? Any additions? Okay.
One thing we've talked about here before that I think has worked really well and has changed since Clay was here is discussion with staff directly. Are you comfortable, Mike? I mean, when Clay was here, we just didn't talk to directors without him being involved, and that worked fine because we knew the rules. My impression is you're okay with that, but would like to be copied. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there.
Okay. Yes, no, that's perfectly fine. As I've said to you all before, we're a small community. It's easy to have direct access via email, and some of y'all do that. Just know they're going to copy me in their responses, or they're going to engage me. And if it's something that they're just not real sure about, they're going to let me know. So you'll probably hear from me directly to get the clarification and then to do the follow-up. But, every once in a while, some of you have gone straight to one of the directors and just copied me on it, and it's perfectly fine. I don't get hung up on it. It's just, well, unless you're spreading rumors. But the main thing is just always remember, you're not giving instruction, you're not doing those kinds of things, but asking questions, asking for data, that type of thing. That's perfectly fine.
Anything else? Okay, so the next page is council discussion about expectations. This was just kind of a list of things that also developed over time, in that what we're looking for from council is a framework for solutions, or the council is a framework for solutions. We like to provide, or we are to provide direction to Mike and staff, and then Mike is to go and do. We are policymakers, trying not to get into the weeds. Sometimes we have questions regarding the weeds, details, so that it helps us make the decisions. But when it comes down to how things are going to get done, that is Mike and staff. And what that does is that helps us be more efficient with our time, and also helps staff not run in 4 directions and then be pulled back by somebody else to go another direction, and those types of things. We talk a lot about recognition, about different personality styles. We've all done that. I don't know what's it called, splash, spark. And that was enlightening when we're dealing with different personalities. Did you do that? And if you would like to share, I think if you have, like, if you want to see what mine is, and it really, it's kind of cool because it compares and contrasts your style with my style. I'm more than willing to share, and I think most of the council members would do the same. And it was very enlightening when we did it the first time, because we actually sat down and talked about the different personalities and where they are. I think we've all done more of that in our real worlds than we ever used to do. That piece of it is, I think we all do that pretty well. I could list some examples, but nobody here would want me to list their examples, so I won't. And then a framework for change for individual or group behavior. What we talk about here and how we deal with each other has turned out to be, I think, and I've said this to people before, that we are all friends, but we are not, it's not like we go out and socialize. We don't go do a whole bunch, like my certain set of friends that I go and have dinner with a couple times a week or go to lunch with, or it's kind of, we work well together, and that works well. We all have different circles of friends that bring different information and different perspective to the council, and helps us make some really good decisions, and allows us to, I think, better represent the city as a whole. And so hopefully this has all come back together so that we can, work together well. Some of this, the next part of it was what we had discussed about how we would work. And that if we, that A is if, I do it in executive session if we're off topic, because we can't talk about anything that's not on the agenda. And I think everybody understands that piece of it. But sometimes when we are in work session, or, we get a little off topic, it's one of my jobs to bring everybody back to what we're there to actually talk about. Start on time. If there are 5 people, we go. If there are not 5 people, then expect texts from me ahead of time saying, are you close? We've got a quorum issue. It's nothing personal, because if 2 people or 3 people are running late, all 3 of you get a text and say, who's going to get here first so we can start the meeting. The other piece of that is we don't stop and regroup. If there's a question, if you were in the middle of a conversation and you need to answer a question in order to make a decision, don't hesitate to ask that question. But we try really hard just to keep moving and not waste anybody's time. Meeting times. Set for a reason. Some of you know that there have been a couple of times when we moved the works and executive session up to 6 because we didn't have much to talk about. And then we were over 30 minutes because we have a tendency to have the discussion we need to have. So we pretty much stick to those 5:30 and 7:30 pretty tightly. The whole idea of a question. Sometimes we do questions and it comes up because of conversation. If you have a question during your review, feel free to pick up the phone or email Mike and get an answer ahead of time, or make sure that Mike knows you have that question so they're prepared to answer the question at council. We don't really want to do any gotchas. We want to make sure that the answers that are given are thoughtful and are prepared. If you want additional data and you ask for that in the meeting and not before, and they go, "Oh, I don't have that data with me." But if you tell them ahead of time, you can make sure that they have that data with them. What am I missing with that piece of it?
I would add the Bob Mahalik rule, which is we go around the dais to talk. If it's been said, there's not a need for 5 people to say the same thing. You can always say, you know, I agree with Bijou if you feel like the public needs to know where you stand. But that's really worked well for us. And we used to get on Bob for not talking, but he would say, I agreed with y'all. Why should I say the same thing?
Yeah. One of my tricks, especially when I have something to say about certain topics, is I write down all the things that I want to say, and then I talk last. It's just a rule that I made at the beginning that I was always going to talk last and not first. And so as somebody said it, I just cross it off, and there's no reason for me to talk. It works well for me too. And that was because of the Bob Mahalik rule.
You don't realize it, but we always know when it's something you're passionate about when you don't wait till last.
That's probably true. That's probably true. Yeah. But I never go first. Never go first. Okay. Any questions about any of that or anything that you would like me to do differently?
Go back to F, the
Uh-huh.
meeting times. I know we talked about developing time limits for discussion items. Is there any impetus to formalizing that, or is that just a casual?
Well, we talk about how long will this take, and it's on the minds of the presenters in there. It was like when last week when we had the legal or the legislative people there, it was like, okay, you guys have 20 minutes. And we specifically knew who we wanted to talk first and kind of go down that road. But especially when it's a discussion, we don't know exactly what questions will come up. And we don't want to stifle that conversation either. So we have a general idea, yes. And normally the stuff that's at the end of the agenda can be slid to a different meeting. Is that correct?
Well, in the case of Tuesday night, where we were hearing from our legislative guys, you know, that it went long, but there was a lot of information, a lot of good questions. So there was no fault, you know, that was a great discussion, and always learn a lot listening to those guys. So yeah, that was, if it went over the allotted time limit, that was a good use of time.
But then you remember, we didn't do the last item. Yeah, because we're going to do it tonight. Yes, sir.
So on item J, council generated agenda items. Are we on the second page, or are we still on
We
the first
can be.
page?
We can be.
So this is for the main session or work session or any session?
It's pretty much work session. If there is a topic that we want to start discussion, it's very rare that something goes immediately onto the main agenda where action is taken. But if you want to discuss something, it can be put on the retreat. It can be, you know, we may have some discussion about what exactly do you want to accomplish, that kind of stuff, to make sure, you know, that we're doing the things that we need to do. In previous rules or clarifications, it was always you needed at least two. And that was an internal rule, is that you had to have a conversation and at least two people had to be interested in it to go on to the agenda. But this is what actually,
That's just informal, the
yeah,
two.
that was the informal, was the two.
So informal going to the main agenda items?
Well,
You-
the
you-
main agenda, I mean, if you, I can't even think of an example of something that would go to the actual meeting that would, somebody would take action without conversation.
Okay.
No. Yeah, no, go for it.
Well, and I was just gonna, I'll start with that, and then I do want to go back to the time, but we'll leave that up. I was gonna say, in the time I've been on council either, I don't know of any time that it's gone straight to those things. I think every time it's been, if there's something that the council member wants to bring. Sorry, thank you. Bring to the discussion, thank you so much. Bring to the discussion, it's for work session, right? And then see whether you have majority of council, right? You've got the 4 nods that say, yes, we want more information, or we want staff to pursue that. And then that leads to putting it on the main agenda, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like we had, I remember in the past, we had an item with regards to no cell phone use while driving before it became a state law.
Oh, yeah.
And that came up for discussion a couple of times at council, but it didn't move forward from there because you didn't have the 4 nods, and then it became a state law. Another time we had the no smoking in Coppell, and so same thing. And it's just, we want to make sure we have the opportunity to open that discussion, because I mean, if there's something that I am passionate about or I want to talk about, you never know where the other council members sit, and they may not have thought of bringing it forward. So we want to make sure we have that open discussion, but not put it on the agenda immediately for a vote.
And I would add to that, I think this gives staff time to give us background. If we bring something directly to the meeting, there's going to be questions, and staff's going to need to do research, and it's going to go back and forth. So if we can get through that in work session, by the time we bring it to the main agenda, we're all informed at least.
Did that answer the question? Okay. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I wanted to go back to the time, because I think, Councilmember Wes had made a comment about the time.
We are at work session.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry, Wes. So it just feels like it's been a long time since we've had a retreat.
I know, it feels that way.
But I will say that what I've really appreciated is the fact that we look to whoever's presenting to say, how long do you think that will be? And there's been times where they're like, well, it's 20 minutes. I could do it in 5 if that's all you have. And we always say, you know what, let's go ahead and push it to either another meeting or after the meeting if they're okay staying. I'd rather do that, but at the same time, it sets expectations for us rather than formalizing it. Like, I don't know that I'd want to formalize it, because I don't want to feel restricted and be like, well, I had something to say and we're 20 minutes up, move on to the next thing. I think that our mayor and other mayors have done a great job of saying, okay, I've heard everybody. Are we ready to move on? Rather than just leaving it open for the sake of leaving it open for discussion. But I wouldn't, all that to say, I don't know that I'd want to formalize it, because I want to make sure everybody feels heard. And especially we have a lot of new council members, and we're going to have more new council members. And I want to make sure that they feel like they're not on a time constraint to ask questions.
Let me see if we missed anything here. Oh, one of the things, again, for John, and the other council members have heard this a lot, is over the last several years, our staff presentations have included history. And there will come a time when that history becomes redundant to you. But know that that's not just for you. That's also for the people who are listening for the very first time. We got questions more than once about, I can't believe you came and you just, it was the first time that I saw that on the agenda, you voted and it was done. And it was like, okay, we've talked about that for 6 months. And this just happens to be the first time that you saw it. So having that history helps the people who are watching for the very first time know that the council has been discussing it and we've been brought up to date, and we asked the staff to go back and get more information, and then they came back. The conversation about Magnolia was a perfect example of that. I mean, we hadn't talked about it in nearly 18 months, and then all of a sudden it's back on the agenda. Without that history, anybody watching for the first time wouldn't know. And it also serves as a reminder for us about all the different things that have gone on during that time frame. And I'm pretty sure that that's going to continue going forward because I think everybody likes it.
May I add, not only that, but I also really appreciate the fact that we don't have an item come in to work session and then be asked to vote on it at the same meeting.
That is, yep, that is true.
I really like having that time to sit back and think and ask questions, and then have staff, if you have questions, come back with further information. That's very, very helpful for me.
Okay. Anything else that you can think of? Anything that we need to add? Did I miss anything, Mike?
No, ma'am, and I was just making a note. We'll work on some language about cell phone. Since y'all have talked about it several times, just as a reminder.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, just as a heads up for everybody, especially in the workroom back in the back, depending on where you're sitting, all your information can end up out there in the on the web, just because of the way the camera works. And so that's another reason why to be careful with the information that you have, your personal information, right?
So I'm probably pretty safe. Who's on that end?
Brianna and
and Bijou. Okay.
So anyway, so it's just, it's just a reminder, right? So we'll just add something to that effect.
Okay.
I think the other thing this council's done better than previous councils is eliminate side discussions at the dais. Having presented to a lot of councils in my career, there's nothing more frustrating than there to be the official discussion here and you see all these other discussions and you're thinking, I don't have the benefit of knowing what they're thinking. So I think occasionally we'll have ask for a second or, something like that. But I think this council's done a good job of not having all those discussions like I think sometimes we did in the past.
That's true too. And have we talked to you, John, yet about when we're having a conversation and you have a question about an item during the regular council meeting and you have a question about whether we as a council can actually do something or not, you can call an executive session and have a conversation with the attorney about, and ask a question about protocol, or, you know, what we can and can't do, those kinds of things. That doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough that, when it happens the first time, you'll see it, but it is one of those things that kind of discombobulates everybody the first time that they do it. But when it's me telling the public that we are recessing the meeting, we're going to confer with the attorney, and then we will be right back. And when we're in that room, the only thing you can talk about is your question to the attorney. It's like executive session. You can only talk about that particular item. Can't go off on tangents.
And only to the attorney.
And only to the attorney. I think we kind of covered everything. Anybody have any questions or thoughts that we might want to add to this other than the cell phone item? Okay. Okay. Next item is reentry considerations. I'm sure you guys have gotten questions, because I know I have, is when is the public going to be invited back into the chambers? And honestly, it's not quite our decision. We are still in a red in Dallas County, which means you're not supposed to have more than 10 people in a space, in an indoor space. So we're not sure when that happens, but when it does, it will probably be slowly. And if we invite everybody back in, there may be, you know, a certain number of people that are inside the room, and then you might have to go out in that area outside where they can hear what's going on, but they might be spaced apart. We don't know what the next several months are going to be like, but we don't know. Right now, the Open Meetings Act has been pushed out to
It keeps being extended basically almost every 30 days.
every 30
the way
days.
The governor is doing it. What we imagine is going to happen is that he's going to keep that in place at least through the entire legislative session through May, just because it makes sense for them, which then it makes sense for us because that's what it applies. So that's what we envision, but we don't know. Plus, the way the governor set the order up, you know, if you have certain thresholds in your particular county, you have some ability to offer additional restrictions, if you will, no more than what the governor orders. But, oh, sorry. Hi, Tracy. Yeah, she raised her hand. But as long as the ICU beds are the way they are and the way the hospitalizations are going in the county and everything along those lines, you know, Dallas County is probably going to be in red for a while, and for the number of people that can meet. I know we've gotten, this is a little bit off this, but we've gotten through time, different folks in the community want to have bigger gatherings. And the way that the guidelines work is that the mayor has to sign off on it. And I will tell you, I think we signed off on just about every one of them that have asked, or if they had asked and they weren't quite meeting the criteria, we've talked to them a little bit more about the criteria, and they said, okay, they'll adjust. And then the mayor will issue the letter to make that happen. So, but from a public standpoint and the building standpoint, having the public come back in the building, it's by appointment. The building's open. It's just open by appointment. And with the council chambers in particular in the council meeting, I mean, you experience it. It's even a little funky when we go back in the back for executive session. We're
It's
all
pretty
kind of,
tight back
it's
there,
pretty
yeah.
tight. So to
Not
this
that-
point,
Not that we don't want you back, Mark, but we understand I can imagine what it's like from your angle watching us. Because we look closer together on camera and, but having one more person in there would make it just that much tighter. So,
Well, I get my first vaccination next Friday, and then 28 days after that, I get my second one, and then probably 2 weeks after that, I'll be ready to come back.
oh, good. Well, obviously the way that it has worked is it's everybody's personal, and I really appreciate that when somebody doesn't feel well and we have this option that people stay home, and that's a good thing. Now, that said, there is a move afoot that they will and TML is part of it, is to extend some of the good things that happened during COVID and the extensions from the Open Meetings Act to allow people to participate via Zoom and via phone call, because across the state, many cities have seen heightened numbers of people who are watching. They have seen heightened numbers of people that participate. So there is a move afoot to try to get the legislature to open up a few more options for us, that there might be more hybrid meetings in the future. We'll see what it comes down to after this session, but that is one of the things that they are looking at. And this, there's a lot of things that have been proven up or have been exposed during COVID. And so I'm sure we're going to see several things that are different in the future because of the different things that we've been able to accomplish during COVID. Anything else? Nope. Any questions about anything on that? Yes, sir.
Are we as a city being, I guess, being more restricted in terms of how many people gather in the chamber versus, let's say, a church, in limiting the numbers?
Well, church, yes.
Okay,
I mean, churches are excluded.
okay. And what about like in compared to other cities in terms of their gathering, for example, in chamber?
Not in Dallas County.
Okay.
Dallas County, I mean, it would be hard for us to say we are opening up the chambers, but only one person can come in because there's already 10 of us here. Or there's already 9 of us here. So our gathering, I mean, you've seen that most of our staff does Zoom because that's one more person in the space. So I do not believe we are any more restrictive than anybody. There may be some that are not paying attention to the restriction. I can't say that there are not, because there are those who don't pay attention to the restrictions, and that's on them. We like to follow the rules. At least I like to follow the rules. I think Mike does too. Oh, and there is one more item that is highly important. Before we leave today, if anybody has any specific candy requirements or requests. Gary is collecting them to make sure that Ashley knows what kind of candy. Ashley and Crystal.
I'm carrying the mayor's water. The meetings go much better if she, what is the candy that you, no, the other, that Crystal always did a great job. We have better meetings when the mayor has candy that she likes. So I'm just trying to look out for you guys.
Okay, he just threw me under the bus. Well, I just got a brand new one. This dark chocolate with crispy rice. It's pretty darn good. Focus, focus. Get back. I'm sorry. That was under code of conduct, house rules. So the important things that allow us to keep functioning. Heath bar, there you go. Yep. All right. So are we done with item A? Now we get into the meat of it. My favorite thing, budget.
Okay. She just looks at me. Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So we'll start talking about this year's budget. I want to just highlight a few dates as far as critical dates for y'all. On the 5-year plan that we're going to talk just a little bit about a little later, that's April the 15th. That'll be a workshop with council.
Excuse me, what's that called?
5-year forecast.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. Wow. All right.
Wait, just one thing. I made this a big deal because when we put it out there as the 5-year plan, people think that that's what we're planning. This actual document is a tool from which we do our planning from. So it is a forecast if we do nothing else. So that's why I keep bugging him about forecast versus plan.
You'll notice the tab does say 5-year forecast.
I did.
Yes. Then, of course, elections May the 1st. And if there is not a runoff, the council retreat will be on Friday, May the 21st and Saturday, May the 22nd. Then on May the 25th will be the Crime Control Prevention District public hearing. Then we fast forward and you see that we do have a June 5th Tuesday. That's what kind of gets us into the budget season in July. July 8th, the budget workshop. July 9th and 10th. If there's a runoff, then that's when the retreat would happen. If there's not, you're free that weekend. The budget workshop with the council on the 20th. And then on the 27th of July, remember, this is all part of the SB2. You're doing this much sooner than you've done in the previous years. July 27th, the council will be voting on the maximum proposed tax rate. Then on July 29th, the final budget workshop. Depending on how we get the data from the appraisal districts, it's possible that we could be working off of a proposed number as opposed to the final number, because the final number may not have been gotten to us by then. So that's the little bit of flexibility that goes in, but you'll have that going on. Then on August the 10th will be the crime control budget, the tax rate public hearing. And remember, again, with the changes to SB2, then you'll be adopting the budget and the tax rate. And then the ratification of $1 more in revenue. That's all part of SB2. So those are the critical dates related to the budget calendar. You have those. Please get those on your own personal calendars now. And I don't know that Ashley or Casey have sent these dates out as hold dates yet. But if you'll do that, you'll at least know that what's coming to you. So, Mayor, that covers the calendar. There's a lot more to the calendar, as you know, and there's a lot more work in the budget, as you know, but those are the critical dates as far as council.
Are you still planning to have that last week or the second meeting in June canceled?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
just an FYI for you. There's usually just one meeting in June and November and December.
Right. Okay, so that's it for the calendar. Next up on the 5-year forecast. So I'll go back about 24 months. That's the last time that you saw a 5-year forecast. And you recall that, again, with the SB2 and trying to work with what that was going to be, we knew that we had to change up, if you will, our 5-year forecast. And so this memo and what's behind it, and I'm not going to go through every detail at all, just gives you an idea of what you'll be seeing in the forecast. And it's going to have a different look. A lot of the data may be similar, but it's going to have a different look. And there'll be 3 sections: engage, educate, and involved. The engage portion of it is really talking about the purpose, the 2040, how to read the document. The educate is the numbers. And as you know, one of the things we talked about in the forecast is, Tracy and Vicki, help me. We used to go out not only 5 years, but we went out like another 20, I think. And it just gets too far out there. So we're pulling that back just from a reality standpoint. If you recall, it would show what the tax rate would be if everything stayed the same. And we never, I mean, if you go back and look at every one of the 5-year forecasts we've ever done, we've never matched those tax rates. So it's just kind of superfluous, we think. And so we're dropping that out of there. And then the involve is talking about how we're working with the citizens and encouraging further participation. So that's what the 5-year forecast will look like. That gives you an outline on the next couple of pages. And if you recall, it's been 2 years. So let me say this. We just go pretty methodically we spend a lot of time on the assumptions when we talk to y'all about what's going into the 5-year forecast. Because as in past practice, we are probably over conservative in our approach, but that's allowed us to be really strong financially because it opens up the flexibility that we have when we go into the budget process, because we use the 5-year forecast to help develop the budget. So that's part of the overall discussion. That's probably of a 2-hour meeting. That's the first hour is just going through the assumptions that are involved and the comparisons and everything along those lines. Yes.
So when we talk about budget, and I didn't think of this the other night when we had our lobbyists there. Last year we told the folks in Austin the schedule was not going to work, and indeed it didn't work very well. And so we're looking at the same problem now of when we get appraisals and when we're required to have a budget, et cetera. Has that been talked about at all in this session of fixing that?
Yeah, my understanding is it has been a topic of discussion, but it's already been dismissed.
Just tough, live with it.
Figure it out.
Yeah. That's my understanding.
That's such a shame. I mean, that's not good for the public. Okay. Thank you.
Have you heard any different? That's what
No.
That's what I've heard.
The conversation that I had with one specific individual said, I don't know what you're complaining about. You don't have to have as many public meetings as you used to have. And it was like, we like those public meetings. And he went, yeah, right. I mean, total dismissal.
The mayor, well, y'all had copies of it too. We had submitted a letter. Was it House Ways and Means?
Yes.
Yes, it was House Ways and Means. And we went through and Casey did a great job, if y'all recall, just kind of walking through the problem with the calendar. The House Ways and Means, when they came out with their report, basically.
I mean, it may be the most important thing we do every year.
It is.
And it gets squeezed into a couple of days. And we're fortunate last year that we were in a better position than we thought we would have been.
Right.
But if you're not, when the appraisal comes in, you've got to redo your whole budget thinking that you've been working on for 8 months in 2 days. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't make any sense.
And Jennifer's not on the line tonight. We can talk about this maybe at a work session or even the 5th Tuesday. But there is something happening this year with the appraisal district. They've already let us know that they're already trying to figure something out that may delay or change the way we get our numbers again this year. I can't tell you exactly what it is. They're just starting to communicate it, but and we already have seen there's a lot of legislation already being introduced specific to appraisal districts. So
To me, it's hard when we tell the public, come to the budget meetings, understand how this is coming together. We show them this is the direction we're going, and then potentially we have to change everything with about 2 or 3 days notice. It's just frustrating.
So I have a question. Since Mayor, you deal with other mayors, how are they, accommodating this schedule, and are they conducting public hearing or public meetings the way we conduct here in Coppell?
Sorry, there are some that, again, everybody handles this differently. Some that are only holding the meetings that are absolutely required,
Oh.
and it makes them happy. And then there are those who are meeting a lot more often, and trying to do as much as they can. But again, like Gary said, when it comes right down to it and you get your numbers at the last minute, last year, pretty much across the Dallas, everybody was scrambling, trying to figure out what they were going to do because of the way they gave us the estimated numbers. Didn't turn out to be quite as bad as what they had estimated, but everybody was doing the same thing. I think we have our next mayor's meeting.
The 12th.
The 12th?
Mhm.
The 12th. I might just ask that question.
Okay.
That'd be a good question to ask, to see if anybody has found the
sweet spot.
the great
Formula.
formula. There you go, formula to make it all work. But again, if Dallas County is already fudging, then we're in trouble. And I heard today that a lot of the things that the legislature is looking at is not necessarily coming after the cities, but they're going to go after the appraisal district. And oh, by the way, that'll change the cities. It's like, really? So,
And the tough part was, look, we know we're in COVID. We're still in COVID. That's part of the challenge the appraisal district has. Last year was the first year of SB2, coupled with COVID, and it wasn't normal. So we don't really know from last year to use that as an experience to know exactly that's how it's going to fall out this year. So we just got to be flexible and agile like we were last time. We do talk about it as the city managers, and it is a struggle. So, Mayor, that's all I have on the 5-year forecast.
okay. Any questions on the 5-year forecast? It'll be fun to see how it's different. Maybe
Next,
I'm the only one who thinks it's going to be fun to see how it's different.
well, I know the staff is you know how Kim gets excited about water and sewer rates? The staff is really excited about the 5-year forecast because they're really looking forward to doing something different. Next up is our sales tax performance. And, the sales tax is performing at or better than it was last year. So let me kind of talk through that a little bit. Last year in November, well, actually in October of 2019, when 334 came about, and we were working through it, it had a date of April 1st of 2020. So we went into lockdown and we started adjusting our sales tax. We came to the council, we explained everything that we were doing, why we were doing it. And we amended the budget down for the revenues. We amended the budget down for the expenditures. And then the rule came out and said it wasn't going to go into effect till October of 2021, this coming October. And like, okay, good. And then COVID's right on top of that, right? So we kept the revenue for sales tax at the amended lower level for the year. And so you see where the budget was 19.7 or roughly 19.7 and actual collections, we came in at 20. But if you remember, we had lowered the amended number down to around 13. We kept it to 13 for the year. We lowered our expenses. And so the bottom line is, you'll see a little bit later, we were to the good, roughly $9 million after certain expenses, that we carry over. So this year, sales tax is right on target for where we were last year. When we went into the budget, because again, we didn't know how the businesses were going to treat 334, we kept the lowered number and actually lowered it a little bit more. And so here is sales tax coming in at a higher level. Our expenses are kept down. We're not coming back and say, hey, let's go spend that difference. And so when we look to this year, it would appear, if we keep on this track, that we will end up in about the same place that we did last year. So we have reduced expenditures, we reduced the revenue, but the revenue from an amendment standpoint is coming in at the higher level, right? So that's good for not only the general fund, but it's also good for the street sales use tax, CRDC, crime control, right? That's all a good place for us to be. The other thing that's been happening this year is as a reminder that we use sales tax expert Kyle Kashner. Kyle's presented to y'all before, actually, in the past. And Kyle has been, as he's contracted to do, audits on companies to make sure that the sales tax is coming to the city of Coppell, that is supposed to be coming to the city of Coppell. And you'll note in there about how well that's doing as far as just the general collections. And so we treat those, if you will, as kind of one-offs, because that doesn't mean it's going to be reoccurring all the time, because there's some time that's captured in that. So you saw recoveries in the audits being performed are $599 for the current fiscal year and $929 since the inception of June of 2020. So that's over 2 fiscal years. So the point I'm trying to paint to you is that from a sales tax standpoint, and from an expenditure standpoint, but a sales tax standpoint, we're doing really well. But the other way to look at it is we're doing consistent with what we've done in the past. It's looking really well because of the way we did the budget, if that makes sense. Okay. And so if you look at the last comments there, in October of 21, when the sales tax rule comes into effect, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a second, you can see what we would project the sales tax to be based on our understanding of the rule. So for next year, we're looking at roughly 10.6, and then just with a little bit of growth each year after that. And that's anticipating a 50% reduction as opposed to a 60% reduction, because as we are interviewing the companies, we're getting a better feel for which companies we may be able to keep as far as their sales tax, and those that we may not be able to keep. And I use the word may because it really is dependent on the company and how they interpret the rule and what they're doing. So it's one of those ones where we're not in control of this situation. We've got to do our best to talk to the companies, which we have been doing. Tracy, Vicky, and Mindy have been having conversations. And just to give you an example, there was a particular company that Vicky just interviewed with, just to show you how this goes. So we have this questionnaire. And part of it is, do you receive 3 sales, I guess, do you receive 3 sales at this location? The answer was yes. So that's a good sign. But then the rest of all the answers were no. So when we turn it over to Kyle, for Kyle to take a look at it, because we think that means we're probably not going to keep them. His confirmation was, yep, you're probably not going to keep them. So that's what I mean, as we go through and interview each of these companies, even though they may answer some questions, yes, there's still different criteria that we have to go through to make a determination. And we're in no position other than just to inform and educate the businesses that this rule is in place. If you didn't know about it, here's what it is. And then we ask them, then we're going to go back and ask them after we get that information, well, what could we do to possibly keep your sales tax here? Right? And so that's going to be something that from an economic development policy and philosophy that we'll be talking to the council about, because there may be some things that we have to do that we normally wouldn't do, but in order to even keep the sales tax, we may need to do that, whatever that incentive program looks like or something along those lines. So it's just a little bit of a game changer is our approach. And there's nothing that assures us that any company that doesn't necessarily qualify under the rule to keep their sales tax here is going to do anything to keep their sales tax here, right? That's a business decision, right, in terms of what's going on. So my report to you about sales tax and where it is right now, we finished up last year in a great position. This year it's going really, really well. We've planned, as you know, from a budgetary standpoint, what it would look, what our organization looks like if we don't have the sales tax. So we're actually going through that right now, you know, as far as what are the implications on our services and how we do business and so forth. Because in October, forgetting legislation, forgetting lawsuit, that's the rule. So we've got to, that's the one confident thing that we know, that's the rule that we're going to have to live with.
So question.
Mhm.
So we cut our cost anticipating a challenge that has not occurred for
Yeah.
the last 2 years.
Right.
So we have somewhat of a surplus.
Yes.
I know you don't like that word.
Yeah, I don't. It's okay.
But we know it's temporary because the rule is going to go into effect minus some miracle with the lawsuit.
Right.
So I guess the question is, some of the budget cuts are not sustainable, i.e. no pay raises, et cetera.
Correct. No, I'll talk about that. Right.
So, okay, so maybe I'm getting ahead of you. I was looking for a philosophy of staff starting to put together their budget and how they're going to deal with that fact that maybe I'm too far ahead of you there.
No, that's okay.
Just how do we deal?
Can I
with
answer that
fact?
as we go along?
Please, okay, that's fine.
Write it down and say, you didn't answer.
Yeah.
Got it. Fair enough.
Well, what I was saying earlier about if you think about the rule and what we don't know, with what we've done for the last 2 years, positions us so that for the next couple of years, as we try to figure out what the implications of the rule, we're going to come to you and talk to you about how to utilize or set aside those additional funds that have come in to help absorb what could be punches, could be knockout punches, could be, you know, jabs. I'm not sure. So
It gives you a glide path. at least.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
But we'll talk more about that in the budget process, but I was going to, you know, talk a little bit about this tonight. So that's how sales tax is going. And, you know, we've talked before, you know, the announcement this year, our number one sales tax producer, you know, is building 1 million+ square feet down in south of the airport. They announced that they were supposed to move in this summer, fall. Mindy's in contact with them on a regular basis. They're not sure when they're moving, but we know for a fact that our number one sales tax producer is going to be leaving Coppell. That's included in the 50% reduction, but before, that was one that was supposed to stay here.
So Mike, the 50%, how you reduce that from 60% down to 50? Is that 50% now pretty solid, or I realize
It's still an estimate. But so what we've done is we are going through, again, you know, I can't tell you the names of the businesses, and I can't tell you, I mean, that's by law, I can't do any of that. But we can go through with our top producers, and we've been interviewing them, just steadily going through the list. And based on the responses we're getting, that's why the numbers come down a little bit, because some we thought we were going to lose, it looks like we can keep. Some we didn't think we were going to lose. We might lose. Some that we didn't think we were going to lose. We know we're losing just based on their answers. So it's just better information from where we were 12 months ago because we hadn't had a chance. Remember, we were just getting hit so fast. And the interviews continue. And we'll be doing that probably through May. So we'll have, when we get into the budget, we'll even have better information for you about, you know, is 50%? It's still a good number for us to use, or is it closer to 60% again? I can't tell you.
And kind of for the same reason that he can't talk about the individual names of the companies, when the city staff walks in and starts asking a bunch of questions, they go, I don't have to tell you this. Why are you asking this question?
Right.
So it is not as easy as walking in and saying, hi, I'm from the city of Coppell. Will you please answer these questions? Yeah, not so easy. So that's why it takes more time. And there are probably still some companies out there who will not answer those questions.
Some of our top 20 will not answer those questions. And we have an outstanding question to the comptroller's office that's been out there since, I think, October. And to get clarification on one of our large sales tax producers, and they have yet to answer the question. And remember, one of the answers they gave us one time was, you can't rely on any answer we give you.
Mike, just a quick question, because you were talking about how on these lists, you know, there were some that you didn't think, you know, it's kind of shifted. And
Right.
I presume the shift is because of the current situation that we're in, or other reasons, or.
Oh,
like-
no, it just goes, because Kyle watches all that. Kyle
Right.
has a feel for the businesses, but he's not into the businesses.
Okay.
And so until we go ask the questions,
Okay, these are just like assumptions based on the information that
based
we
on the
have.
information
Okay.
we have, this is what we, right? I'll give you a specific example because it's a Chapter 380 agreement. So, oh gosh, it was about 3+ years ago. One of the agreements we have is with Quill, right? Staples Quill. And so all of a sudden Quill, there was no more sales tax coming in from Quill. And we were like, okay, what happened? We finally got in touch with someone, right? You have to go through this process. And remember, there's a lag of about 3 months of getting the information. And we found out that they had changed their accounting system and moved their accounting sourcing. So that's why the city of Coppell no longer was getting the sales tax. Wasn't something they notified us beforehand. Wasn't something, you know, and it affected their bottom line because they were no longer receiving the incentive. It was just a business decision that got made. So those are the kinds of things the one major company, that's a corporate decision well beyond anything that we can do, right? So does that help? Okay. It's great to learn about our businesses and it's great to have contact with them. It's just frustrating the process that we have to go through. So that's on sales tax. Any other questions?
Just one question, since we are talking about sales tax. 1 quarter is passed for this year budget. Comparing that revenues from 3 months to the past year, how are we doing?
It's about the same. Okay. We're tracking about the same as where we were last year. And while, you know, Jennifer will be eventually coming after the audit, you know, she mentioned that we'll probably be amending the budget with the revenue coming back up.
Back up.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're tracking. Yeah, the green line for it's just tracking a little ahead of last year. If you take out the one time, it's right on.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. The next thing up is the 1920 analysis. And again, I've kind of alluded to it, but I want to just, again, I'm not going to go through every single one of the lines, but, you know, the thing I want you to notice is that if you look at the top, you talk about overall revenues, original budget, then we amended the budget down to 65, then we revised it back up. And remember, we didn't change our expenditures, we kept them down. And the actual came in probably pretty close to budget. So overall, you know, we came out ahead of revenues over expenditures. Because you see expenditures underneath where original budget was 71, remember amended because of some of the capital expenditures, the revised, and the actual was 60. So at the, let's call it the end of the fiscal year, that means our revenues exceeded expenditures by, you know, roughly about 14. But when you go down and you look at the carryover encumbrances, remember a few years ago, Gary, that was something that at your request, and it made sense. But you know, at the end of the year, we have expenditures that were incurred during the year. We were accounting for it differently, but council said, hey, let's do it this way. And so when you take all that into account, you have for the year actual revenue over expenditures there at the bottom with a net increase of about $9 million. When we finish 2021, we think that's about the number that's going to be again. So the last 2 years is about 18 million. You put last year and this year. At least that's what it's looking like it will be. Okay. So the audit will be ready March, April, and you know the council has that policy, and y'all will have an opportunity to talk about if you divvy it up. That'll be the time when I talk about this is how we'd like to preserve it for the future budget issues, and what we're targeting and what we're trying to accomplish. And again, from a policy standpoint, that's where it's really important for y'all to be engaged in that conversation about the overall direction from a budget standpoint. My point being is, I believe you're going to have great flexibility, right? I mean, that's the bottom line here. You're really in strong financial position. And so that if you go over the walk forward on the fund balance,
Which is where?
that's the very next page.
Okay, thank you.
So you look to, you know, 10, 1, 19, 75, and then you go through and you look at the unaudited fund balance on 9/30/20, 88. Then we have the budget revenues. Then we have the budget expenditures. And the one thing I want you to notice about the budget expenditures as an example. So what used to be below, I'll call it below the estimated fund balance line, take the DART number, for example, see where it says 750,000. It used to be on the bottom as a designated expenditure or a designated balance. And so it moved from the bottom to the top, right? The same way with the 2021 debt issuance, if you remember, and you can look down there and I think it says future debt issuance 0 now. That's been moved up to the top because we're talking about issuing the debt for Beltline. So I say that to just bring your attention to how when you identify projects at the bottom, at some point when the project goes forward, it moves from the bottom to the top, right? And so the estimated fund balance of 9/30/21 is 91. And then here's the identified projects. And you go through and there's the 10% reserve, the 15% reserve. Then there's that council policy allocated for EcoDevo, revenue threats, and projects. And then, and as you know, there are certain funds that you can't touch but you can only use for certain purposes. The E911 is an example. The public education channel for cable, and then solid waste education. Those are all restricted funds. You can't use those. And then these are the other projects that are listed for potential going forward. See the sound walls, for example, the DART sound walls now says 0 because it's moved up to the top, right? So when you go through all of that, then you have undesignated, unreserved fund balance. So at the end, you have the estimated fund balance at the beginning, you have these various projects, and the undesignated, unreserved fund balance will be right at 59 million. Remember, this is a snapshot in time. This is today. in terms of what's going on. So when we get the audit, that'll be that snapshot in time. And just as a reference point too, the CRDC number 2 maintenance, just recall that during the course of the early years of CRDC, when it was supposed to eventually, I think it was around 2017 or so, it was going to end its 20-year existence. And so the councils started setting aside CRDC funds for the eventual sales tax to go away, so that the ongoing maintenance of Wagon Wheel and some of the other parks could be weaned into the general fund. So we have been drawing that number down for I say a little bit, to eventually where that'll zero out. We're not doing it all tomorrow. And each year as we make a presentation, we talk about that transfer. Okay. Yeah, we made the accounts go away
Okay.
in the sense of it's just CRDC now.
Okay.
And yet you're right, there used to be.
Yeah.
And in the budget, there was actually CRDC 1 and CRDC
Right.
2. CRDC 1 is what went away.
Right. But we do still have CRDC too.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah. It could be just called CRDC, but that's what it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike, just a comment about these balances, partly for John and for the candidates. I think sometimes we get criticized publicly because of that fund balance going down or going up in any particular year, but the reality is it's meant to. Like the DART is a great example. We've put aside $250,000 a year for 3 years, so it looks like we're doing a great job because we're building fund balance, but we put it aside so we could spend it on the sound walls, et cetera, or whatever. So then it drops that year, and it's perceived that we're not doing a good job of managing that balance. So I just think it's important for people to realize that's meant to fluctuate because it's a savings account to some degree that we're
Right.
going to spend eventually.
Right. And so if you remember this, and we talked about that 2021 debt issuance, I'll come to that when we talk about the debt, because that was a big debate a couple of years ago. And so I'll show you how it's being used and how we are following through with what we said we would do. Okay. So that's the walk forward on the fund balance. And again, the council is in a position that has great flexibility and great agility because of the financial strength of the city of Coppell, right? So that's the message that this should deliver to each of you.
What you were just talking about is the $1.5 million
Right,
that we set aside 2 years ago when we had all
right,
the tax rate.
right. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. The next step is just the quarterly report or the quarterly update. This is out there, and we give you, I think it just came out this week in your email.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a graphic representation to it. Now, the only thing that I would tell you is, as you look at this, remember these are moments in time. And just to give you an example on ad valorem taxes, so if you go to the page 3 of the booklet, at the very top it says general fund revenues. Remember that property taxes are eventually due before penalties by this weekend. And so you can see, yes, that's where we were through December. And that's the middle of the month. That's not even to the end of the year. That's through the middle of the month. And so at least I think, Tracy, isn't that right? Would they close the books at the middle? Right. Okay. So anyway, the point being is don't let those kind of numbers, because they work themselves out as far as the process is going. I'm going to look and see if I get a text later on that says, no, Mike, it's through December 30th. But either way, they're at the end of January. And so anyway, so that's just a graphic representation, and it's out there so that you can see of what's going on from a budget. But as I said, you get the financial report every month anyway, so you have an opportunity to see what we're doing.
I kind of like this graphic representation. Just saying.
So that's really informative, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Mayor, it's been an hour and a half. You want to take a break?
Does anybody want a break? Yes. Okay, so let's recess for about 15 minutes. We will be back here at 1:45.
Well, we're used to go, go, go.
Well, and I'm just not used to sitting. You need to have.
I need your very desk right here. For future work sessions, we're going to have very desk. I'll give Jason a call.
Okay, let's get started. The next item on our list is the value proposition.
Thank you, Mayor. The council through the years has used a facilitator, Rick Robson. If some of you remember a while back, the last time he was with us was in January of 2018. So that just gives you an idea what was going. At that time, what we were talking about was best total solution, which is a philosophy that previous councils had adopted as far as guiding the way that we look at whatever challenge is presented to us as we go out to bid or we find a solution. And so I wanted to use tonight just as a short reminder of where we are. And I know that I've talked to Rick and I've also talked to Marcel on the Spark Lumina. And so for the May retreat after the May 1st election, both of them have kind of set aside some time so that we can bring them back before the council to talk about communications, interpersonal relations, and the value proposition. So behind this front page that highlights the components of best product, best cost, best total solution is a paper that Rick basically kind of uses as part of his talk. And the thing that, you know, just kind of to cut straight to the chase is that the council in the past has said, look, best total solution is our value proposition, which is product intimacy, superior expertise, and the client's underlying problem. So really, best total solution really gets to the relationship piece of the business and making sure that that's where our focus is. It does not mean that we still don't search the best cost or the best product. It means our focus is on best total solution, right? So I know part of the discussions in the past where, well, you know, this is important and this is important. Even when the value propositions doesn't lighten the load of those other items, it just says this is where your real focus is. And by being focused on this, you're still taking care of the other two items. So it's really a focus question. So it talks about that a little bit on define your customer, narrow your focus, you know, highlighted there. And then if you look at the first setting, it's called operational excellence. That is the best total cost. And so when I say cut it short, the best example of that type of business value proposition is McDonald's, Southwest Airlines, Walmart, and IKEA, right? So just ideas of who uses that as their value proposition. And then you talk about, product leadership, and that's best product. And the examples that are given there for best product are Apple, Nike, Rolex, Microsoft, and Harley Davidson. This was all pre-COVID, right? In terms of the, yeah. But again, it's, and the example, if you, and I know if you recall some of the things that Rick talked about is take the iPhone, right? It's a best product, but they cannibalize themselves because, you know, they're at iPhone 11, whatever they are, and they're going to come out in a few years with iPhone 12. And
Wait, aren't we on 12?
we may be, yeah. I'm on 11, so.
Hey, I'm on 8.
The very example though, they're continually making tweaks to the same product, right? And so their customer base and so forth. So that's that particular idea. And then customer intimacy is the best total solution. And the businesses, if you will, that they talk about there are, and I think this is where y'all kind of rallied around, was the Nordstroms of the world, that type of service. It's not a Neiman Marcus and it's not a Target and it's definitely not a Walmart. So that just gives you a kind of a, if you will, a visual manifestation of what customer intimacy looks like. So anyway, all I'm presenting to you tonight is everything that we do in the organization, we talk about this idea of best total solution. And you've heard some of that in the presentations that we've made before council. So that's where the term comes from. That's why we use the term, because that is something that the council in the past philosophically has said, that's where we want to be in the city of Coppell. So there, it's just, again, I don't have to go into it a whole lot. Y'all can, it's really on the floor. Are we still in that mindset? And that's the real question.
Does anyone have cause to change our mindset at this point? I know we consistently are looking, especially now with what we're looking forward to with the change in the sales tax rules. We are looking at a lot of cost type situations, but it's usually the solution is good and the cost is lower. So I think we are looking at total best solution in that kind of a situation. So I like Mike's example of focusing, but still not letting the other pieces go.
And to reiterate, we use this as a guide, and that's what it is. It's a guide.
Yeah.
But it allows us when we're looking at things, and there were some of the bids. I think it was on the janitorial service. There was a reference to total best solution there in terms of, the interview with the company, the specs, the service provided, and everything along those lines. Y'all have seen, because the way we write our bids, y'all have seen in the past where it isn't always necessarily the lowest bidder that we are making a recommendation to use. And that's because of the language in the bid specification gives us the flexibility, and we use the criteria really about quality and what are we getting for the dollars. So that's how we use it, and we talk to you about that, right? It's not just something that we just do. And again, we'll be bringing Rick in May and or June, depending if there's a runoff, just to have this very conversation with someone who facilitates that kind of conversation on a regular basis.
So Mike, the way I think of this, and correct me if I'm thinking of it wrong, the best total solution to me is all of the options are equally weighted out there on a table. And you take a look at all of those unless one of them has some particularly high value. And then if that one item does have a high value, then you can use that as an influencer, but otherwise everything is pretty much equal. And
yeah, I would say that is a way that we look at it. And when we go through interviews, when we do RFQs or when we're talking to engineers or architects or anything like that, those are the kinds of things. What's their final product? What's the process they went through, right? And when you're looking at products and the warranty, the quality of the work, the support, the service that goes into it, and let's just say the support, it's a high quality product and the support's a little bit more expensive and it's not the lowest bid, but it's got a longer term as far as its utilization. That would be a best total solution. So if there's nothing to say, no, we want to make any particular change or anything like that, that's how we'll continue to function. And then, like I said, we'll come back in May and we'll revisit again. Okay.
Brianna?
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say is I don't have any changes. I appreciate this being the foundation of how our staff across the board and our leadership functions. I think we have seen in the past, or I've at least seen in the past, where an example is where you do take the lowest bid, right? And you look at it just at cost and don't look at the entire picture. And then it could be a maintenance of a street and then found that you're having to do it again in 2 years versus you could have gone 10 years or whatever it may be, right? And so And then I think also the customer centric focus, I think is a big piece as we talk about that customer intimacy. And I think that's just part of our culture. And so I love seeing all of this because I think it provides a guide for everybody to function on. So I don't have any changes other than to say I appreciate this.
I see nodding heads.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next subject, the top third compensation. Historically, this is before I came here, and I came in 2012. This is really a conversation. The council's directive in the compensation analysis for the city of Coppell has been that we will, from a competitive standpoint, maintain ourselves in the top third of our market. And the council at the time, and has been going on for quite some time, chose the cities of Carrollton, Keller, Grapevine, Flower Mound, Allen, Louisville, Farmers Branch, South Lake, Addison, Plano, and Frisco as our competitive market. And through time, I will tell you, probably in the mid-teens, when Plano and Frisco is still growing, on the public safety side, that was where a lot of the police and fire would go, just based on pure from a pay standpoint. Some of those cities are the equivalent of civil service, and so they kind of have built-in escalators, if you will. And even last year, while some of the cities didn't increase pay for their employees, they still had to meet their obligations to their civil service for public safety. And so where we are across the board as an organization, we are no longer in the top third, specifically in public safety. We're below average in those particular cities compared to those particular cities. So Gary was asking earlier, what it appears that we would need to do to be back in the top third, and specifically as it relates to the public safety. And this doesn't mean we're in the top third, the top of the top third. This means we're at the bottom of the top third, right? If that makes any sense at all. But it looks like it's going to take about 6% for us to get back in that particular range. The cost of a 6% would be somewhere in the neighborhood of between $2 and $2.5 million to do. And as I was saying earlier, this is kind of like infrastructure. Every year that you don't invest in it, you get further behind because the number keeps growing on the other side. And so when we go into this budget season, I will tell you from my perspective, I'll be working very diligently to do what we can to get us back into market, specifically in public safety, but throughout the entire organization. We have not this past year, there hasn't been a lot of movement in either police or fire, with people leaving or anything along those lines. But that's not a predictor for the future because, Frisco continues to grow. Now Prosper's growing and Salina's growing, and it's just easy. So I'm not saying that we have an exodus at all. But in the marketplace, that's where we sit. And so this is also still a philosophical conversation for the council. So I'm asking again if that is still our philosophy. At this moment, I gave you the dollar amount. I really want you to kind of forget about the dollar amount because it's really a philosophical question. To your point, if that's the philosophy, that's our job to figure out how to get there. It's not your responsibility. But we just need to know where we need to stand as it relates to compensation for city employees.
I would like, I like Wes's example on this. He and I've had this conversation more than a couple of times over the last several years. And I really like his example, so I'm going to let him do that.
Hope he remembers.
Should I have said something to you before?
I was going to ask you which one of the many ones I I think that I hope what you were referring to was when you get stopped by a police officer in Coppell, the first thing that you see is not his stainless steel 44 Magnum pointing at your head, that you end up with a very nice, polite person that recognizes you as his customer and that is willing and is more than willing to talk to you about the issue at hand, and does so in a very polite and professional manner, which is not what you will see in South Dallas or in many other areas. Was that
Well, yeah, but
oh,
I was gonna relate it to pay, not another city.
so yeah, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
we can hire, we can literally hire our public safety employees at any rate we want to pay. And unfortunately, you're going to get what you pay for. And it comes down to, you know, we're not going to be able to get the professional attitude, the professional demeanor if we're paying in the bottom third. We're just not going to do that. Those people will go to other cities where they feel fulfilled, where they feel enabled and feel wanted. And that's the culture that we've striven to create here. And it requires a special person and a special set of requirements on them. And that's what we've quite honestly gotten used to here in town. And our citizens have gotten used to it. Gary's asking.
Gary.
Yeah, I would say I support the previous philosophy of being in the top third, whether we have to do that all in 1 year to catch up, whether we spread that over a few years. I think there's a lot of discussion and options to look at. Part of what has always been important about that to me, one, is providing good service, but two, for cities of our size, if we're not paying above average, we become a stepping stone. And we've seen that when we're at TML talking to other cities of our size. So whether it's deputy city managers or directors or whomever, folks come, they build their resume in Coppell and would move on. We haven't had that problem. And I think it's because, one, it's a good place to work with a good culture, but two, because moving on to a bigger city with more stress doesn't necessarily mean more pay. And I think that's helpful, particularly, you know, when we talk of infrastructure and stuff, and we've got people on staff that can say, well, 22 years ago when we did this, this is why. There's value in that. And that's why we see our directors retiring here as opposed to moving on. So I'm not quite sure how we get from point A to point B, but I'm very much in favor of the philosophy.
I have a question for Mike. Over time, we've had to make periodic adjustments to the salary base for our public safety. And the fact that we deferred raises this past year, I'm sure, is only exacerbating the problem. Were we going to be seeing that? The 6% seem, I mean, was that just due to escalation in salaries all over the area?
Well, so first of all, we haven't done a salary survey across the board for 2 years. We have one more year to go. We do it every 3 years to just keep us current. On the public safety side, we did a quick check and we already know we're behind based on published starting salaries. In the police world, from what I saw, it looks like it's about $3,300 on the starting salary for a police officer. And on the fire side, it looked like it's closer to about $1,500. So once you start making those adjustments, then it has a ripple effect as far as the rest of the group. And plus, if you recall, one of the things from a competitive standpoint we did probably about 3 years ago is we also introduced a step plan for our police and fire, which helped keep them because we were losing some after about 5 to 7 years, because they can go and then, start somewhere else at a much better pay. So that's where we are currently based on the information we have right now. I've asked, as we go into the budget, I've asked for a a study on the public safety specifically for this, to help us go into this budget year. But I know based on, we went through, obviously last year was a completely different year. We were really upfront with the employees. We were not going to do pay increases. We had so many unknowns, SB2, 334, and everything along those lines. And the employees really took it in stride, right? There were some surrounding cities, and when we get in the budget process, we'll talk about this, that still did go ahead and give like a 2 or 3% raise from just what was going on. They weren't faced with 334 like we were in terms of what's going on. So we know that those markets moved around us in the surrounding cities, but until we do that actual compensation study, I can't give you a specific. So, but I can tell you, by not doing anything last year, we typically have done around 3%. So if you look at 3%, 3%, again, not that you would do it all at one time, but hey, that's what the number is. But on the public safety side in particular, what I was saying is like infrastructure. As you start getting behind, that snowball gets harder and harder and more expensive to catch up. And so on public safety, we know we've got to be really purposeful about that.
I agree with Gary that we do need to let you guys go figure out how to fix it.
I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't see you. Just jump in.
So we had a list of cities that we're kind of using as comps. I'm wondering if Plano has outgrown our likeness, if we shouldn't drop them and look and replace it with, I don't know, Allen or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm in agreement with the top 1/3, but are we really looking at like type cities?
Yeah, just to thank you. I mean, that's part of the original question too, about, if this is still the market that you want to use to compare. Again, it was Carrollton, Keller, Grapevine, Flower Mound, Allen, Louisville, Farmers Branch, Southlake, Addison, Plano, and Frisco. I would not ask you tonight in the moment to come up with any particular new cities. It's something that we can come back maybe even this Tuesday in March in terms of what's happening. It's a valid question. It's one that we ask, and I will tell you on the public safety side, yeah, they may move on to the Planos and Friscos, but Plano and Frisco's, they are hyper competitive with each other, which is kind of a race. I couldn't think of it, what the right word is, but which really throws all the cities actually into a kind of a little bit of a problematic issue. So to your point, Mark, we recognize Plano and Frisco is kind of a step above, but it is part of the top third right now. And if we change cities, that's okay as well. That's your philosophy of what the top third is, defining what the market is.
So maybe one of the things that you can do for us is when people do leave, where do they go?
Right now, they're all heading east, north and east.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Friscos and the Planos and the McKinneys and the Allens.
Prosper, Salina, those guys.
Yeah.
Well,
It's because they're in growth modes, and
Yeah.
so they're trying to. I mean, they're building stations and trying to. We were very fortunate, with the addition of the fourth station when we brought it on. We came to you early on, and we were able to bring some great people on, and that's the great thing about our fire department is it's a culture that attracts great applicants. Same way with our police department, it attracts great applicants, and so because of our culture, and we have competitive pay. A lot. They're getting younger. There are many that have just been born in the last about 25 years. But yeah, you'll see some of them with the grand opening of the fire station. But to the point, what we can do, maybe we'll do that. We can. How about if I do this? We will come back, say the 5th Tuesday in March, and we'll give you some ideas and possibly some other cities that we are still going to compete against Plano and Frisco. There's no question. Absolutely. Do you want to be in that arms race? That's the question. That was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Because I think we offer something entirely different.
And that, again, I will say this, as city managers, we talk about the arms race, you know, in terms of what's happening with public safety. Because you recall Dallas started, because of their issues, started raising their pay finally, and good for Dallas. It just has a ripple effect throughout the entire metroplex.
Go ahead.
Brianna.
Right. I mean, and I'll just echo the fact that I want us to be competitive. I want us to be in the top third. We had to catch up before, and we don't want to let it go where we're having to constantly catch up, right? But you know, a couple of things of right, where are people going would be one thing. I'm also a visual person, so kind of understanding or being able to see something of where everything's at.
We will get that.
Yes, and then I think the other thing too is, like, are we, not that I want to lose good talent, so I don't know how to phrase this, but what is that turnover that's happening, right? Is it 1%, 5%? What does that look like? I don't know if we can get into that, but I just,
No, we can. The reason I'm smiling is because kind of COVID's thrown it all
Yeah,
in a
so-
really different environment. You know, when I asked the question to police and fire, and I think I said this earlier on, when I asked the question to police and fire this past year, they haven't had loss, right, in terms of what's going on, because we've been adding at the fire department and, and police department. So when you have well-run departments that do still pay, you know, well, you're just not going to have people leaving. What the issue we were having is, remember, we weren't being able to promote. And so a lot of the folks, when they got in that 5 to 7 to 8 years, from a career standpoint, their only way to get promoted was to move on, right? So it wasn't necessarily pay, but it was also their own self-driven motivation. Good people, they have desires to do other things, right? So Mayor, what I've heard is top third, let's take a look at the cities. And as we get more data, we'll bring that data to you as far as where we are in the market.
Well, and one of the things is when those individuals who recently came to us, who else were they interviewing with?
We can ask.
You know, I agree with the Mark. Most of the cities that you mentioned, it's not 41,000 population. It's most of them are double or triple or
Well, not South Lake or
Addison.
Keller or Addison or Farmers Branch.
most of them are, you know,
Yeah.
Frisco.
Well, Frisco
Plano,
and
Flower
Plano,
Mound,
yeah.
Louisville, Carrollton, all of them are double than us. So do we have a more competitive cities like 41,000 population that we can compare with?
Yeah.
Can I ask why that matters? I mean, the only reason I ask is if we're losing them. So there's probably a difference in culture of going to some of the major cities. And so we would be more attractive. So I agree. But to other suburban cities, if we're losing them to them, the fact that they've got 3 times the population, to me at least, doesn't matter. We've got to be competitive.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned that is he might just mention promotions, right? Our staff level is not high as Plano or Frisco is. We have 450 or below that. So it's a limited roles people can promote to. So they will always look for opportunities in bigger cities where they can become a director or a deputy city manager, whatever. So we don't have that flexibility in a city where 41,000 people lives with the limited staff.
And so that's where you got to look, I think, at the whole picture. Why would people leave? Is it for promotions? In some cases, I think we've had to pay a premium to keep people from leaving, to keep the turnover down. And so I know we've looked at that at some of the higher level positions versus cities that are larger and said, do we constantly want to have a churn at those positions because there's always a bigger city to move to? So I think we got to look at the whole picture. I mean, maybe it's a two-tiered thing, Mike, where we do compare to just cities our size, and then we compare to cities that we compete with for these people and see what the difference is.
Yes, we can kind of take a look at the different cities. There's another aspect of this just to put to the side, because we're talking about cities. We compete against the private sector in information technology. We compete for Julian, in terms of what he does. In finance, we compete against accountants and accounting firms. For engineers, this, finding civil engineers and finding engineers is really tough. So while we look at cities as from a competitive market standpoint, we also, while we don't go out and interview and find pay, we don't sign bonuses for engineers coming out of college, right? So it's all part of it. And, my commitment to you is we'll bring to you an analysis, or at least kind of a listing, if you will, of the particular cities. And we look at all kinds of factors. You look at, not only the size of the community, you look at the standard quality of life in the community. I mean, those are all the factors that y'all have to look at to say who are our competitive cities, regardless of size, in terms of what's going on. So again, what I've heard is top third, look at some considerations about where they're going to, why they may have left, where else they may have been interviewing for, and then, let y'all just take a look at that again, right? And whatever it comes out to, we'll follow that particular philosophy, going forward. The mayor and I had a conversation, and I said, the one thing that I appreciate, and thank you for your affirmation of the top third. The one thing that I would say to you that I've never is a strong word. I never hear the word average about Coppell, Texas, or from any of y'all. And so when we broach into that kind of territory, some cities, going back to best cost, we want to be in the average, right? In terms of what's going on. We don't want to be high. We don't want to be low. We want to be average. That means something. One of our neighbor cities that's their goal, is to be average.
And that says something to your employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that's what you expect is average.
Right.
So
thank you. So we'll move forward with that. Again, you're just affirming this evening. We'll come back with more information, but that's important to us so we know how to look forward. Next up on the discussion is the estimated impact of SB2. And again, this is just information. Start wrapping your mind around this as it relates to the budget coming up and what SB2 does. And these are just estimates, but so our current year property tax revenue for the maintenance and operations side is 40 million. And the way SB2 works basically is there's a no new revenue rate, and then there's the 3.499, right? That's the equivalent of what used to be called the rollback rate. And I'm not getting into, this is where the forecasting comes in when you're going to look at in April. I'm not getting into what the appraised values are increasing or anything along those lines. I'm just telling you, based on SB2, using this as an estimate, we can map out exactly what our property tax revenues could be if the council chooses to use the 3.499. So for next year, again, not knowing how the appraisal is going to come in, for next year, the 3.499 number applied to current property tax revenue for maintenance and operations means our property tax revenues, forget whatever the appraisal is, if you go down this particular path, we can only raise approximately $1.4 million. And remember, this is an environment that we're expecting the sales tax to continue to reduce because of 334. So these are the kinds of decisions that over the last 2 years, y'all have been getting yourselves prepared for in adopting tax rate and adopting the way you were going to approach Beltline and the way that you were structuring your debt, the way that you were managing your expenditures, right? Because this is the path that maintenance and operations, which are what it costs us to do work on a daily basis, this is the revenue that supports that. And if you recall, this barely supports fire, police, and only a percentage of public works.
But assumes appraisals are even.
This is just straight up revenue. I'm not even getting
So,
into
I mean,
the appraisal.
but in fairness, if we say, this is all you've got to cover those increases, that assumes appraisals are even, which, I mean, appraisals could go down for that matter.
Oh,
but-
sure.
But that's just in fairness, the bigger picture.
And no new coming on.
Right, which we have less and less
Less
opportunity
and less
for new
opportunity.
growth.
Yeah.
Right, and business and personal property. I understand what you're saying in terms of appraisals. That's why I'm using the comment, regardless of the appraisals.
I'm not being critical of the presentation, and this is always the challenge with budget, is you got to break it down into all these pieces to
Right.
understand it and then try to put it together, and there's too many variables to really understand it. So I'm not being critical.
No,
But-
I understand, but I just want to be clear. If appraisal, historically, our appraisals have exceeded 4%, for the last probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, and if you believe Zillow, it's the residential is
Right.
going to go up about 10% from year over year from this year to next year.
Right.
But that doesn't mean anything because we're maxed at this.
That's the point I'm trying to make. That's the max. And that's if you decide to do it.
And so that means you have to lower your rate to get to this number.
So that's what I was saying, I think it was the last 2 years we've shown that the way the system works now is that the M&O rate will have to be reducing.
It will decrease.
Right. The M&O rate.
Factoring in the debt service rate into that whole discussion from a variable too.
Right, which goes into what we're talking about. Yeah. And so this is where the legislative session gets really tricky. 2 years ago, there were some who wanted to have any certificates of obligation actually count towards that 3.499. And if that were the case, it depended on how they wrote the language, that could be extreme for any city, not just Coppell, but for any city. Because then that rate cuts into your M&O rate, which is what funds police and fire. And so I will say this too, we've made comments to the folks that we work with down in Austin about the example with the governor, using the language that he's using about defunding or reducing expenditures for police particularly. Take our example. We didn't have anything to do to control the comptroller issuing a rule change. We had reductions across the board in the city of Coppell, including the police department. So now you're going to penalize us because we don't have as much money? By the way, I think there's a real question too, legally, whether or not the state of Texas can withhold sales tax dollars generated in a municipality that aren't theirs. So that's just, I slept at Holiday Inn last night and I had my law degree today. So
So part of this is to Gary's point, there's so many different pieces to this puzzle that we're not going to see the whole part of it, the whole pie, until much, much later this year. But just for my clarity, we won't be able to see more than a $1.4 million increase in our M&O rate, or M&O, but yet we're going to see a $10 million reduction in our sales tax revenue in that same year.
yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And you know what? To your credit, I'll say this: to your credit, you haven't been out there saying we're going to go say to our taxpayers, we're going to, ask you to increase the tax rate or anything like that. You've instructed. This is where we are. We're going to figure out how we're going to make it work. So, that's the direction that we're going in. I'm not here asking you for permission to say, okay, can I show what it would look like if we were to increase it? I'm not asking you to do that. We're figuring out a way to make it work.
Well, and the other piece of that was, as we said, and figure out how to make it work without reducing any services.
Oh, that little challenge. Yeah.
So don't increase pay, freeze all positions, don't fill the ones that
We're in process.
were in process, and maybe somebody left yesterday and we're ready to fill it because that person's really needed. So it's, yeah,
Challenge.
it's a challenge.
I mean, Brianna mentioned over the council meeting, the school is going through that exercise now.
Oh, yes, they are.
We just got to go through it 2 years ago and last year, and
That's what's going on.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say we were lucky that the whole rule issue came up with the comptroller, but that definitely prepared us for where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And go back to the walk forward, if, tonight or tomorrow or over the weekend, you've got that sales tax number in there that we haven't tapped yet, right? We talked about, if you remember when I came to you, we kind of laid out, this is how we're going to do this. Right? I mean, there was a way and this is how we can make up some of the revenue, and we still haven't tapped that yet. Right? So again, y'all have been very, very prudent and very clear about your expectations, and our staff, accolades to our staff. I'm looking forward to letting you, I'll share with you in a little bit, not tonight, but about the things that we think have actually gotten better as a result of COVID. And this is how we're doing things, and this is how we adjusted, and our customers are responding very positively to it. And like inspections, by doing some virtual inspections and those kind of things that, generally across the board has been very received pretty well. Yeah. All right.
Take your phone and show me.
Okay. So that's SB2. How are we doing? Okay. Yeah, we may.
Yeah.
All right. So homestead exemption. We've had multiple discussions through the years about homestead exemption.
It's an annual discussion,
And
which we committed to, yes.
and so one of the attachments that was sent out in the email is it's got the analysis through 21, and it's got all those tabs. Population, sales tax, M&O, new growth, tax rate. You can go through the whole list. And you can see on there it's got valuations, it's got exemptions. And then just to bring you up to speed on that, in the senior and disabled exemption, which includes the veterans, since 1718, it's increased by 468 persons taking advantage of the exemption that's offered to them. So now it's up to 2,368 households, which is approximately 18% of the housing stock. In 2017-18, it was 15%. If the council this is senior disabled veterans, if the council were to choose to increase those exemptions by $5,000, property tax revenue would decrease by $68,000. If the increase was gone from $75,000 to $100,000, so a $25,000 increase, the property tax revenue decrease to the city would be approximately $343,000. So that's just on the senior and disabled and veterans. As it relates to the homestead exemption, for every 1% increase in the general homestead exemption, the city receives $251,000 less in property tax revenue. So therefore, a 5% increase. So if we went from 5 to 10, that would reduce the city's property tax revenue by $1.25 million. Recall that every penny, so every year we give you how much a penny is worth, that every penny reduction in the tax rate decreases the city's property tax by $838,000 or $840,000. So the next little section is just for illustrative purposes only. And it's It's based on a value of about $429,000 for a home. So for every 1% reduction in the sale in the homestead exemption, so from 5 to 6, the savings to that property owner would be $25. No, if you're increasing the homestead exemption from 5 to 6%,
You would decrease.
you would decrease. So it's a $25. So roughly, if you think about it, every 1% is $25. A 1 cent reduction in tax rate equates to about a $40 savings. Okay. Correct.
Oh, he's right.
Okay, that's on me. No, you're correct. I'm thinking reduction in terms of a cost, right? So for every 5% increase in the homestead exemption, the average savings would be about $125 for that homeowner for the $429,000 home. So as far as the total dollar impact, to attain the same savings for the homeowner, the tax rate would need to be reduced approximately 3 cents. And remember, that's just for the homeowner. That does nothing for the business on the homestead exemption. Doesn't help our business community at all. So under either scenario, increasing the homestead exemption or lowering the tax rate, there would be a reduction in revenues to the city. So that has potential impacts. So the tax rate, the overall reduction in revenue for the city, as opposed to the overall reduction in homestead exemption. So that just gives you an idea of the potential impact of the homestead exemption. And if you remember, the calendar is, if you're going to make that decision to have an impact, we have to do that by the end of May.
And just to clarify, if you do add to your exemptions, your revenue number doesn't go down with the exemption, right? Your revenue number stays the same, and then you give back out of that revenue number if you're going back to SB2 perspective. Is it the actual revenue that you
No,
receive?
we're actually not receiving that revenue.
So it doesn't count here, so you could actually increase?
No. The amount of exemptions, the dollar amount for the exemptions has been going
Right,
up. And so that comes off before the M&O calculation. If I'm understanding your question.
No, what I'm saying is for SB2 purposes, are they using after exemptions or before exemptions?
After, because they're using taxable value.
Oh, okay, taxable value.
Right.
Okay.
So you set your rate based on the taxable value. So exemptions are taken first. And so if the lower value, if I understand your question, I guess in theory, the tax rate could go up if you're trying to keep the same revenue.
Which is what,
counterintuitive.
well, but prior to SB2, I specifically remember a city who increased their homestead exemption and the tax rate in the same year, and it was a net. But boy, those citizens felt good because they got an exemption, a higher exemption.
In that case, they just shifted the tax base from residential to commercial.
Right,
Or the burden, actually.
the
Yeah.
burden, yeah.
So just a question for you, Mike. Oh,
Sure. No, I was just going to say, again, not asking for a decision tonight.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
wanted to get the information out to you because quite frankly, it's a little bit confusing.
So the $2,300 2368, approximately 18%. So that's roughly about 13,000 households.
Yeah, I've got the stat on the number of residents. I think it's between 12 and 13,000.
12 and 13,000.
Yeah.
So if you do increase the homestead exemption from 5% to 10% or whatever, those people are not qualified because they're already getting 75,000, right?
Are you talking about the seniors?
Yeah.
The way the homestead exemption works, as I understand it, is there's a homestead exemption plus. So if I understand your question, if we don't do anything,
Seniors are
they'll
getting-
still get the 75,000 if they apply for it. This side will increase.
So they get this plus this.
Right. So right now, you and I aren't 65.
Right.
All we qualify for is the 5%.
Exactly. That, okay.
If you and I were 65 plus 1 day, we would get the 5% plus 75,000.
Okay, that's what I knew. I wanted to clarify.
Right. So 18% of our households are getting that benefit.
Right, I understand that,
Yeah.
right. Well, what you just explained,
Right.
top of that is
Yeah.
going to be
Right.
5 or 6.
If you remember what it is they don't get multiple, they get to choose if they're 65, they get to choose if they're disabled, or they get to choose if they're veteran, right? In terms of,
Those three are, you pick, but homestead,
it's across the board if you apply.
homestead is across the board. And then if you apply for these, that's on top of the homestead. But you only get one of those three.
One of those three.
One of those 3.
Right.
So what's interesting is
Right.
that 75,000 is about 17% on your typical 429,000. So they're getting 5 plus that, so they're at 22% if they're in a standard
Right.
house. So it's interesting to kind of understand that whatever 18% are at the 20% or above.
You know, we haven't had that conversation all the way to that level.
That was enlightening.
Pardon me?
Right. I was about to say, you ought to be the expert at that then. Not picking on you in any way,
No,
shape, or
he's
form.
probably going, shh. Shh. Don't tell anybody.
So we have, we have the March 5th Tuesday. If y'all are going to do anything with it, tonight you can say, or you can say, we'll keep it as an open discussion. We will now step back, and this is really council telling us what to do. And if you have any other questions or anything like that, please don't hesitate to ask us, for that spreadsheet that we gave you, and Bijo, you probably remember, because I think I sent it out to the council after you asked a set of questions, has got tons of data out there on the residential commercial split, on since 2012, all the exemptions, in terms of how it's grown. Talks about the sales tax, the number of employees, it's got a ton of information out there that you could start to dissect.
It's everything in there.
Yes,
I like it. Yeah. It's one
Mr.
spreadsheet.
Data.
Yeah, I like it.
You like data.
The chart that I find most interesting is the one on the next page. Has the color, the red,
Yeah.
Yeah, this
yellow,
one.
green.
Mhm.
Right.
I was studying that, and I'm surprised to see the level that Coppell is at, and especially when you start taking a look at the tax rate, we get really beat up over that. But I'm really struggling to find a better total solution here than what we currently have. There may be one out there, but I'm not seeing it, or it's not intuitively obvious to me.
I have loved our commitment the last 2 or 3 years to say every May we're going to look at this and figure it out, because I've always thought we need to find a way to gradually increase the homestead exemption, even if it's only a couple percent a year. The challenge is doing that in May when you don't know what your tax base is until July to put your budget together. And then particularly right now, when we know with 334 that our sales tax is going to drop by $10 million, and we can only increase property taxes if we had the gumption to by $1.5 million, you got this huge hole and you're going to dig deeper, it's just hard to figure out how. And hey, I'm not going to be here in May, so good luck. But it's a challenge.
I was never going to say that.
If Nancy's listening, she would say, I don't have to deal with that. But again, there's lots of data out there. There's lots of different ways to look at it. And if we can be of any assistance in getting you information, we're more than happy to do that.
I mean, you could increase the homestead exemption and lower the other exemptions and see what flack you got on that one. Look, here you go.
Can I be clear for everyone? The mayor suggested that, not anyone else.
Who's not running?
Oh, yeah, no, I would have said that either way, and I think I've said that before because I know that it is not a good solution.
So,
Okay.
Mayor, that's about the homestead exemption. That's updated information for you all to just have as a resource in the conversation. Good. I'm glad they could
Yeah.
help. The next item to discuss is the 2021 debt issuance. This really goes to the heart of Beltline. We've been talking about Beltline for a long time. The last 3 years, we've been ramping it up. This past in 2020, because of the bidding and everything that was going on, we came to you and talked about even speeding that up a little bit more. And so this would be the calendar, the proposed calendar for the issuance of the debt, which would be $16 million. Remember, there was the original cost, I think, was about 24 or 25 million. And then because of some of the bids that we've been getting back, and I know Gary, being in the construction, you have a good feel for this too. The pricing has been coming down. Fortunately, it's concrete, not wood, as far as things are going on. So we also geared up on Beltline to help reduce the costs by not tearing up the median as part of the conversation, and paving over it and using it for extra lane capacity during construction. So all that being said, and then you also go back to what we did 2 years ago when we started setting aside dollars for Beltline. And so, when we talked about the walk forward, we're moving that up now as far as the designation, the 1.5. If you recall, in this year's budget, we budgeted another 1.5 because we think we're going to need about 19 in total. So this is a debt issuance of 16. And if you recall, what we talked about 2 years ago was what we thought the impact would be on the debt service. It looks like through all the planning that we've done, the way the rates have come in, and what we're anticipating, that the 58 cents where we are right now for getting the appraised values and all that kind of good stuff, is that the issuance of $16 million of debt, while it increases our debt service side of the equation, because we have it in the M&O side, it'll shift over. We're good on the M&O side, and we can have the tax rate, at least going into the season, at 58 cents. So we told you what we were going to do. We did what we said we were going to do. That's the plan. And this is the schedule that would put the debt in place so that we could start construction this year on Beltline. So you'll be seeing that coming to you. So are there any questions on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. So I thought we were actually planning on starting construction in June.
He may be able to start that, and we have the cash on hand to get it started.
Okay. So I thought that was the last presentation.
That was part of the presentation.
Yeah.
But the debt alignment,
Okay.
because the 3 million that we have, let's call it on cash on hand, is what we can get started with.
I didn't realize we could start without having it all funded.
Well, in the process, we'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
I would say, I mean, this last week has been the week of going to presentations about the upcoming economy and what's going to happen.
Yeah, it
And
has.
trying to time construction prices is like timing the stock market. But the overall of the presentations I saw this week, there was a sense that construction prices will continue to be at the reduced levels through at least the second quarter, but that once you get to herd immunity, et cetera, that there's a pretty big pent-up demand and a lot of capital on the sidelines and available equity for construction, and it could be pretty crazy for a couple of years. So
The
there's
sooner
something
we.
to be said for
Right.
moving.
And then that we talked about that. And I think I mentioned to you at the last council meeting that Kent was going to come to you in February and bring you up to speed on all the various capital projects. And so that'll be a great time to talk to him about that as well. And you know, that has the model in there. And the one thing you see, I'll call it the spike, is Royal. And, you know, we've got some options on Royal to buy time and or to go ahead and move forward. But that's all, you know, this is why I say it's going to take us about 2 or 3 years to figure out the real impact of the sales tax, is because the one thing, you know, is the stability of the tax rate that y'all have been managing to. It could start getting more difficult to do in terms of what's going on. And we're going to have to all learn together as we go through that process.
So on the chart, on the next page, which
Yeah.
is our Excel spreadsheet, what's that? I can't see. Is that 23, 24?
That's Royal.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. But it's in the digital format that was sent out to everybody. So you can blow it up and take a look at it. Yeah, we call it the Breckolator now. The
'Cause It's
Beckolator.
been enhanced.
It's been worked over. Yeah. That's what it's supposed to do, which is really nice. And I think y'all have enjoyed seeing it.
Well, the good part of it is that you can pick and choose and move things around and go, oh, well,
And an
and see how it doesn't change it.
Right. An example of that specifically is Fire Station 1. I mean, we've talked about it this week and we've been communicating with Kevin. Because of the sales tax issue, I've said we've got to at least wait 2 more years. I mean, we just have to, because I just don't know. You know, I can only control so many things, and there's just no way for us to know with any certainty what that thing's going to do. We have an idea. We're going to plan to that idea, but we don't know.
And this still includes the bond for Northwest, correct?
Yes.
We can't pay that off.
Yeah, but
Yes. Let's just say yes. The funding, if there was other funding that could offset the debt payment, there's a way for us to make it work. I understand your question.
That comes off the debt service rate. If you have other funding for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the art center, you know, or anything else. I think that was the art center. The CRDC is funding the art center, so the way it gets counted, there's another funding source for it, just the way it gets counted.
Okay.
So what do you want to do?
okay. Any other questions about this piece of it? We're kind of at a stopping point. If you want to stop, we can do the water and wastewater rates tomorrow, and then the
We can do boards and commissions tonight.
boards, and you think that'll be quick?
Yeah, For me,
Okay.
it is.
Okay.
So Kim, if you're listening,
Kim, sorry that you spent your evening with us, but I'm sure you learned a lot. If you would join us in the morning, that would be great.
I didn't. Is she okay with joining us tomorrow morning?
What time?
Oh, there she is. 6 a.m.
Well, I'll be up at 6 taking my mom somewhere. So
No, what time do we start?
Kim, are you available at 8:30 in the morning or not?
I can be available at 8:30 in the morning.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm so looking forward to talking about water. I mean, this is like the second time you guys have put me off, so third time's a charm, right?
We could do 40 first and then do her. If you want later, you can have later.
No, I think earlier is better for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll send you scones,
Homemade?
homemade.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kim.
Uh-huh. You're welcome.
I didn't
Not
think
tonight.
about that. I might. I might just run to the store and get what I need.
So I know so being it's late, getting close to 9 o'clock. The last thing has to do with the council discussions with boards and commissions. As a result of everything that's happened for the last year and a few months, the council has actually not met with the boards and commissions as you traditionally have. And so the question that we had was, and remember the purpose of this is multi. It's one, to hear what's going on at the board level, you know, as far as what kind of things they're addressing, especially you have two new boards with Ford and Smart. And then, you know, library board comes to you, Parks and Recreation, y'all have that kind of conversation about things that you're looking forward to, what your expectations are of the board and, you know, what you're looking for, and especially in context of some things that they may be working on. So it's a real open conversation that y'all have. Sometimes you have a combinations like library and Parks and Recreation board meet at the same time with the council as an example. Had thought about it, you know, having Ford and Smart maybe meet together with y'all or not, you know, but we can talk about that. But the point is, one, do you want to get back on that rotation? And two, when do you want to start? And I say that because we've got this little 4-month window, and then we have potentially a new count, you know, so we have new council members. Well, we will have some new council members. And so we can wait and schedule some things towards the middle to end. Remember all those meetings you're having about budget. And remember in October, you have all the boards and commissions interviews, or we can work and go ahead and start it to do our best to start arranging some things now. But we have to get on it now because the schedule gets really full, even though school's kind of COVID related, but you know, with all the different things that goes on with the school district and all that kind of stuff. So we just need to have, this is why I said it was short. We just need to have, what would you like us to do? Do you have a desire to meet with them? If you have a desire to meet with them, is it in person or by Zoom? And when do you want to start making that happen?
I think it's important that we have those meetings when the new council members come on. You know, I would say probably the majority of us have had those conversations with the boards, and I think it would be important for those people to have the opportunity to hear that firsthand from them. So if we could push it out until after May.
I agree that those meetings are very valuable and beneficial to both sides. So yes, we need to reestablish. It really doesn't matter. I see the value in Mark's suggestion about waiting till after the new members are on council. I'm also concerned about the schedule. So I'm a don't care on the second part, really.
I guess I would I would do the same. I would err on the side of waiting because of the new council members and just kind of bringing everyone up to speed. At the same time, though, like we've heard from the Smart City Board, they came and gave an update. And I guess for both boards or any of the boards, I guess if they had any updates between now and then that they think should be brought to, you know, the council, maybe it's worth doing that until we meet with them at a later time.
Okay.
And I would put Ford with P and Z,
Well, true. Right.
not, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay. 'Cause
That makes
I
more
don't know that
sense.
we've ever had Oh, P and Z and Economic Development.
Yeah, i.e. Ford
Ford.
and
That was,
PNC.
that was the pairing. Okay. Okay. Anyone else? No? All right. Well, that's the direction we'll go in, and because I can work with the liaisons on staff to start working with their boards to start looking at the schedule. Now, the last piece is, gosh only knows what's going on with, vaccines and COVID and everything else. Do you have a preference? Would it be best just to plan on Zoom? And if we can meet in person, we'll kind of publish it both those ways, or what? Just plan on
Plan
Zoom?
on Zoom.
Okay.
I would plan on Zoom until we know that the majority of people that want to be vaccinated have been vaccinated.
Okay.
Well,
You can.
Well, yeah,
Agreed.
I would say we want to provide options, right, for people. We don't want to make them feel like there isn't, like they have to be there in person.
Right.
So,
It's the hybrid.
right.
Yeah.
This may be more of our standard practice going forward than we know, right?
And I mean, it is beneficial because you remember even on easy things like boards and commission interviews, we can actually do them virtually if someone's out of town and they can't be available that particular day.
We've had such difficult conversations over that, and this past year's just
Yeah.
shown it. It's very easy to do.
It's very easy to do. I mean, we were staunch. Well, if they can't be here, well, guess what? Life goes on.
A lot of things are different, that's for sure.
You just kind of figure out what's really important, right?
So Mayor, that's it. So we have it. And tomorrow morning breakfast starts, well, it's available. It's starting at 8 a.m. And the idea is that we start the discussion at 8:30. We'll lead with Kim and I both talking about the water and sewer. And then we'll go right into 2040 with Tracy. And the targets be finished by noon. And based on past practice, I think that's doable.
Everybody okay with that? Hot diggity. We are, oh wait, we have to talk for another like 30 seconds because then it'll be 9 o'clock. No, we are recessed at 8:59. Thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Good night.